Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I will be reviewing episode 5 of Married at First Sight season 19. Okay, so this episode starts out and we see all of the couples are preparing to go on a boat. Jalen and Joss are saying that they're in a good place, and they both said that they are basically falling in love with each other. Will and Brittany seem to also be in good spirits. We see that they're connecting a little bit better and things are getting kind of more romantic between them. And then we see Chad and Belinda. Chad is still joking, talking about how they both look dead sexy. And then Josh is trying to convince Jalen to jump in the water with him. So far, the boat ride is going well. It seems like all the couples are kind of vibing well, which is obviously kind of different from what we've seen in the previous episodes with a lot of like fighting. It seems like everybody was in good spirits on this boat ride. I don't know if it was the alcohol, but this episode has started strong so far. Then we go to Megan and Derek, and we see Megan basically say that she's funny and that she keeps it interesting. Now guys, I don't know about you, but Megan to me is not funny at all. So I don't know if she was joking when she said that, but she said it with like the most serious face I've ever seen. I don't really know what she's talking about. That must have been a joke because Megan is not funny. I'm so sorry. I wasn't sure what she meant with that. So we then see Derek say that he's basically not a fan of Megan's dog. And he doesn't really, love the fact that they also sleep in the same bed. And that is kind of the only concern that he has when it comes to them going into the real world and merging their lives. Really, I don't understand people that let their dog sleep in the bed. The things I've seen my family dog do, they would never get into my bed, like ever. So that's something that I've never really understood. Yeah, so we'll see how that works out because I've definitely not dated somebody because their dog slept in the bed before. Like it was a problem. So we'll see how they can merge that together. Okay, so we see Brittany and Will. We see them holding hands. They're sightseeing. They're not fighting for once, guys. So I'm like, okay, there might be some hope here. They even shared a kiss, like at the top of this castle. So, things might be turning around for Brittany and Will, right? I hope so. But they look very loved up. So it was nice to see. Then we go to Pat and Rhonda and we see them basically making drinks. And Rhonda says that she wants to talk about the other night. So she says that she wasn't trying to criticize Pat in regards to him being in a relationship, I believe like maybe a couple of months or maybe a year prior to, I think it was a couple months prior to being on Married at First Sight. So we know that that's something that bothered Rhonda, right? And it seems like she had a conversation with Pat about this. Yeah, so Rhonda is basically saying that she wasn't trying to criticize Pat in regards to him signing up for Married at First Sight shortly after ending his previous relationship. But that Rhonda was really wondering, is he really ready for marriage? Or did he sign up for this because he simply just doesn't want to be alone? Because it happened so close in time. And honestly, I think that Rhonda's making a fair point. I think this is something that would cross my mind as well. I don't know if I would necessarily voice it out because I think anybody's reaction to that would be they're going to get defensive. Like Pat was probably defensive. But I think that it's a fair concern for Rhonda to have because he wasn't out of that relationship for long before now deciding to be married. So I think that's fair. Pat explains that he basically felt judged by Rhonda and her reaction, especially finding out, that Rhonda basically was in a relationship several years before signing up for Married at First Sight. So, in Pat's mind, he was kind of like, he felt like, she was kind of seeing his situation worse than hers. Like she gave it a lot of time before signing up for the show. But then in Pat's instance, there wasn't that much time. So yeah, once again, this is something that I would have probably kept in my head. I don't really think that Rhonda should have brought this up to Pat. I think that he's not going to have a good reaction to this. Nobody essentially would. Right. And then Rhonda says in this conversation that she feels smothered. And she says before she uses the word smother that might not be the right word. I was like, what is Rhonda talking about? And basically, Rhonda says that she's very used to being on her own and that since signing up for this experiment and since being married at first sight, she's been with Pat day in, day out, right? Because she's married, right? And you can tell, like, I can tell from Rhonda's energy that she's very much a free spirit, a free bird. And I don't think it's easy for her to be with somebody in such close proximity for such a long period of time. Now, where I think it's strange is, I mean, Rhonda must have known that after getting married, she couldn't then continue to live like she was single, right? And I understand Rhonda's concern in voicing that she's just not used to being around someone 24/7, but this is marriage, right? So eventually she's going to have to get used to it, right? And I don't know why, but I do feel like Rhonda really liking to do her own thing will probably cause more problems with her and Pat as time goes on. So we shall see. Okay, we then see Josh basically trying to get Jalen to get into the pool. Jalen clearly does not want to get into this pool, guys. Like, she probably doesn't want to get her hair wet. And I just don't understand that every time, Josh and Jalen are on screen, it always seems like Josh is trying to get Jalen to do something she doesn't feel comfortable doing. This is like, I think this happened like 3 or 4 times now. So I don't know what that's about, and once again, I think it's okay that Jalen is kind of, Josh is pushing Jalen out of her comfort zone, but I do want to see, Josh also doing things that Jalen likes to do, right? Like going shopping or whatever it is that Jalen has an interest in. We haven't really seen that yet. All we ever see is Josh kind of trying to push Jalen out of her comfort zone. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Maybe this wouldn't be an issue, but it's just something that I've observed. So it is a little strange. Okay, so basically we see Jalen is asking Josh about how they kind of view themselves raising children, right? Josh explains how he basically had nothing growing up and he would just like go on these, long bike rides. He'd be outside exploring for hours and hours at a time. Because there wasn't really a whole lot to do. So he just spent a lot of time outside exploring on his own. And then Jalen basically says she grew up opposite of Josh, that there were always things to do. It seems like she did grow up a little bit more privileged. And her parents kind of had the means to have these elaborate birthday parties and like throw different events for them. And then we also find out that Jalen never finished school, which is something that I didn't know. I believe she just finished high school and maybe never went to college. And we find out that it was the same for Josh as well. And it seems like they kind of come to this consensus that you don't necessarily have to finish school to, be successful in life. We know that Josh is doing very well and has a business that makes, 6 figures. So it's good that they kind of have that thing that they kind of agree on, if that makes sense, where they're both basically saying that if their kid has interests outside of just going to school, but they have passions they want to pursue, that should be fine. So, that's just another area where it seems like they're kind of in agreement. Okay, and then Jalen mentioned something that, I found interesting, but she basically brings up again that she never really saw her parents be affectionate with each other, right? So she's telling Josh that she doesn't want that when they have kids. Like, she wants her and Josh to be all over each other to the point that the kids are like, ew, get off of me, And I get where Jalen is coming from. I think that it is healthy for your kids to see, their parents like, having that like romantic, it's a good thing to see. And it's unfortunate that some kids never see it. I don't think that's a good thing. But I, once again, feel like Jalen is very caught up in this idea of having like a fairy tale type of like marriage and relationship. And yeah, we'll see. But I do think that Jalen sometimes kind of sees relationships in these like rose-colored glasses. And, marriage is not an easy thing. And sometimes I do wonder, I have like my opinions on Jalen. Let me not like go into it too much. I really do hope that this couple works out because I think they're probably my favorite. Like, they're the ones I'm really rooting for. So we shall see. Okay, so then we go back to Belinda and Chad. And they're basically discussing what they want to do when they get back to Austin. Chad is basically talking about taking Belinda to all these places, trying to figure out what she's into. And, Belinda kind of says that when she talks to Chad about being more romantic, she's not necessarily talking about just going all around and having all these experiences with him. She's talking about spending that quality time, kissing, being affectionate. Like, there are other things that are involved. And I find this interesting because I did notice that, Chad kind of tends to move towards talking about going to dinners or doing this or doing that. But there is still some romance missing, right? I don't know what that's about. It seems like they almost have separate definitions of what romance means to them. So I don't really know how that's going to work. It'll be very interesting. Yeah, and then Belinda basically brings up that Chad has a very jokey type side to him, which we've all seen, right? And that she thinks it's also very indicative of the fact that he's a girl dad. And, she likes that in a way, but I can tell that she doesn't want him to be that way all the time, right? She wants to get deeper and more intimate with Chad, know more about him, because I think sometimes people that joke a lot, it can also be a front and kind of inhibit your ability to even get closer to them, because sometimes when you're trying to have deeper conversations, they're too busy cracking jokes, right? So Belinda wants to know, she wants to get deeper with him, which I think is very important. And then Chad basically starts talking about what he likes about Belinda. He says things like, she balances him out and she makes him feel special. Then Chad just kind of has a loss for words. He's just staring at her in this awkward way. And I'm like, what happened here? Very strange. They awkwardly basically stare at each other for a while. And, it gets so weird that eventually production steps in and tries to kind of help Chad get, his thoughts in order, or help him remember what he was planning to say. And Chad kind of says something back to production. Eventually, Chad says he's tired, and we see him and Belinda get up and they just leave. I don't really know what happened here, but I'm very confused. I'm very confused because I picked up on Chad almost being annoyed with production and maybe just annoyed with the fact that they were filming. I don't know. But yeah, it was very odd. So then we see Belinda and Chad, and they're in bed and they're talking, and there's still this awkward silence between them. It's continuing. Chad eventually apologizes, right? And it seems like Belinda didn't like the way Chad had spoken to production when they were at dinner. When he was basically at a loss for words. I can tell that Belinda's very bothered by what happened at dinner, right? You can tell that she's just not happy with Chad's behavior. And, we see her say that she needs to sleep on it. And then all of a sudden she starts crying. And I'm like, what? And, she kind of expresses that she feels afraid to show up for herself and really say how she feels with Chad, because she's afraid that Chad is going to basically resent her for it. And I'm like, what? Chad basically responds and says that, if they're together, they're together. She needs to voice how she feels. And I don't really know what's going on with Belinda, but I did notice this, where sometimes when Chad will do or say things, she kind of smiles and just kind of goes along with it. But I don't think she's really expressing when she's unhappy with things that he does and says, right? And this is a big problem, because when you're in a relationship, you need to be able to say how you're feeling. I don't know what is inhibiting her from doing that. There could be something about Chad that maybe doesn't make her comfortable saying how she's feeling, right? And to me, that's a big problem, because when you're in a relationship, you need to be comfortable enough to express how you feel to your partner, right? Maybe, right, I guess I'm going to think that because they got married at first sight, this is a very fast process. Maybe she's not comfortable enough yet with him to do that. But I'm hoping that she can get to that point, right? Because to me, I'm like, that is very important, to be able to say how you feel in a relationship. So Chad basically says that Belinda needs to feel safe. And I agree with Chad. That's really, really important. So I'm hoping that Belinda will get to that point that she feels safe with Chad. I don't think she's there yet. She's not. So, we shall see. So we go back to Brittany and Will, and it looks like Brittany has been crying. Now, when I saw Brittany and Will, I thought to myself, a couple minutes ago, right, we saw them laughing and holding hands and kissing on their honeymoon. I guess I didn't think that already we would be back to this. So clearly something has happened again. Brittany's not happy. She's crying. So Brittany basically expresses that she's feeling crappy. She says that she was thinking everything between them was good and realized he wasn't comfortable being intimate with her. She says that she feels rejected and that no wife wants to hear that her husband doesn't want to be intimate with her. I'm so lost because I'm like, how are we back on this topic? Like, this was the same reason that they had this big argument, I think on episode like 3 or 4, I don't remember, but we're back to this issue again, right? So Will basically apologizes, right, about how he said what he had said when he expressed that he didn't want to be intimate with her. And basically Will is saying that after what happened the first time they were intimate together, right, and how it led to this big blow up between them, he just didn't want that to happen again, right? So Will basically insinuates that they can do everything else but that, right? And Brittany says that it's hard for her to move forward with Will when she feels not wanted or rejected by him. So Will then says that it seems like being intimate to Brittany is basically the biggest facet of her not feeling wanted, right? And Brittany basically starts naming things out. And she's like, you don't really want to talk to me. You're distant with me, right? And now you don't want to be intimate with me. So in Brittany's mind, she's like, it's not just about the intimacy. Like, it seems like they don't talk and that there's distance between them, right? So Brittany says she takes all of these things as rejection, that it's not just about being intimate, right? And then we see Will apologize and Brittany is still looking so sad and miserable. It's just like, oh my God. And we see Brittany, say that she needs a moment, like to herself, and then Will leaves the room. Now, I do not think that Will likes Brittany, right? I just don't. I think that he's really trying to put on an act. I think maybe because he's on the show, he doesn't want to look bad. I don't know what's going on here, but I think that that is the root of the issue between Will and Brittany, right? There's all these other things happening, right? That's upsetting Brittany, upsetting Will, and they're having these arguments. But I think that the root of this whole relationship, the root issue, is that Will is simply not into Brittany. Rhonda basically says she's excited for them to move in together. And we find out that Rhonda hasn't cohabitated with someone for 25 years. That is a long time. That is a long time. So she basically is saying that this is going to be a huge shift for her. And we already see her mentioning to Pat that she will sometimes need space and like time to herself to like go to the grocery store alone or like go for a walk alone. And we see Pat say that that's totally fine. Now, Rhonda, to me, I feel like she's somebody that wants to be married, but also wants to be single. Like, it's very strange. I'm like, lady, pick one. Like, nobody forced you to get married at first sight. But it's giving like, I want to be married, but I don't want you around all the time. And when I'm tired of you or I want to have my alone time, I want to be given that, right? So I kind of acknowledge that Rhonda will have to adjust because 25 years is a very long time to not have lived with someone. I'm understanding of that. But, Rhonda has to really, really try because I can see, her creating a situation in which she wants to be married, but she's living like she's single and still moving like she's single. So we shall see. I had a lot of faith in this couple in the earlier, episodes. I'm slowly losing it a little bit. I don't know if they can mesh because they are very, very, very different. So we shall see. So then we go back to Megan and Derek, and Derek basically says he's excited to be with someone because he wants to start a family. And basically we see Megan saying that Derek can play EDM music while she's at work. And then we see them like make a joke about how Derek needs to remember to put the seat down. But overall, these two do seem excited to kind of merge their lives together. we shall see how that goes, because yeah, I have my opinions on Megan, but yeah, we'll see. So then we go back to Jalen and Josh, and we see that they're also both excited to kind of go back into the day-to-day life now that the honeymoon is coming to an end. Josh says that he can't imagine not living with Jalen. And basically, like, this episode ends with, you know, Jalen and Josh like going to take a steamy shower or something. So yeah, I mean, you can tell that in the intimacy department, Jalen and Josh are good, right? So I think that if they have any other issues, there's going to be other issues that come up between them. But yeah, that's the end of episode 5, basically. I will be reviewing the next episode. Please let me know your comments down below. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.